Well, today, Hurricane Ernesto is making its way up the Atlantic towards Bermuda, where a hurricane warning is officially in effect. The National Hurricane Center says it could reach Category 3 strength by tomorrow.
Meanwhile, Puerto Rico is picking up the pieces after Ernesto dropped nearly a foot of rain on the island. The water swept away cars and caused a major dam to overflow. 500,000 people are still without power there today. We have coverage from all angles. NBC News meteorologist Angie Lastman is following the path of this storm for us. But first, we're going to start with NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas, who is in Bermuda ahead of Ernesto's arrival. So, Guad, how are people there preparing, and what are officials saying about the storm's strength when it actually hits where you are now?
Vicki, Morgan, people in Bermuda say they are used to storms, so they say they know how to handle a hurricane. But of course, authorities here want residents to be prepared. They want to make sure that everyone has what they need at home: food, water, and the usual items for a hurricane. They offered a press conference yesterday where the Prime Minister spoke and had this to say to the residents.
Do not be lulled into thinking that you can wait until the last minute. This is not the time to underestimate the power of nature. Time is of the essence. Preparations must be completed as soon as possible.
Now, the National Hurricane Center has issued a hurricane warning for Bermuda. The forecast of the path right now has the center of the storm passing just slightly west of the main island here, but that would still bring the force of those winds to this part of Bermuda. So, of course, government officials here want people to be prepared. Morgan, Vicki?
You know, can we also get an update on the damage in Puerto Rico, Guad? I mean, what about power and water? Has the main energy company been able to get that back?
Well, yesterday, at its worst, there were about 700,000 customers without power in Puerto Rico. Overnight, that number was updated. So this morning, the number was nearly 500,000 customers still without power in Puerto Rico. Now, Luma Energy said the weather kept them from going out to make inspections on some of the power lines. Today, the weather is much better, so we can expect the helicopters from Luma Energy to be able to go into the remote areas where the power company has to check on power lines before they begin getting the power back on to a lot of people in Puerto Rico. Now, the issue is they don't know when the power will be back on for a lot of the people that continue to be without power. Now, when it comes to the running water, we know that there's issues with the filtering systems, with vegetation and debris coming in with the storm and blocking some of those filters, and that's why they had to shut down the water for a lot of people. The last number that was shared by authorities in Puerto Rico was that more than 200,000 customers were without water. President Biden did declare an emergency. He approved an emergency declaration, which will give additional resources as they continue assessing the damage there in Puerto Rico.
The images of all that water on the roadways is devastating. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas in Bermuda for us. Thank you.
Let's get a scientific look at where everything stands with our meteorologist, Angie Lastman. Angie, I mean, how much is Ernesto expected to strengthen? What are we looking at in terms of when it first started and where we are now? I mean, is the East Coast going to get any of these remnants?
Well, the first question is, how much is it going to strengthen? Likely, you heard Guad mention, we could see a Category 3 hurricane before we start to see it start to make the impacts on Bermuda. But we'll also be watching for it to sit over some of this warmer water here for the next day or so before we start to see those impacts happening. Right now, it winds at 85 miles per hour. It is moving north at about 14 miles per hour. So it's still a Category 1. Notice what you're seeing here. Okay, where you see the orange, like the lighter yellow, those are tropical storm force winds. We're expecting those to make their way onto and impact folks in Bermuda here as we get into the later parts of the day tomorrow. So maybe midday, maybe late morning, kind of around that time frame. By the time we get into the later parts of Friday and into Saturday, that's when the hurricane force winds start. So you'll slowly start to see things deteriorating in Bermuda as we get through the day on Friday, and then things really ramp up late Friday into Saturday. It does look to become a Category 2, potentially 3 in between now and then, but likely nearing or passing over Bermuda as a Category 2. We'll see that hurricane warning stay in effect, of course, until then. We're likely looking at impacts as far as flash flooding and those destructive winds. Now, the last time we saw this, way back in 2020, guys, that's the last time we saw it for folks in Bermuda, but we on the East Coast will also see some of that high surf and the rip currents up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, those images we were seeing were already just so shocking. NBC News meteorologist Angie Lastman with the latest. Angie, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.